Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching today's Western U.S. Regional Forecast video brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, I'm going to take you back and to show you what March has given us so far. We're going to start off by looking at the flow of the jet stream. This will be a key component to understanding this forecast video. This is what March has looked like. We've largely featured a pretty broad trough stretching over the Aleutians that's built into what we call this high over low pattern that looks something just like this. Now, this is typically a pattern that for the northwestern part of the United States, we typically are quite dry, this high over low flow pattern. It tends to put a lot of systems through California, and they miss the northwest. This also makes for very active weather across the central United States, where we've seen a lot of flooding so far this spring. The other consequence of that flow pattern is all the heat is up in Alaska. So we're very warm in parts of British Columbia and Alaska, and generally much of the country has been quite cool. Now, there have been some times, especially here in the southwest, where we've been warm. We've had plenty of moisture in these big blooms that have happened because of this, but overall, general, the temperature pattern has been quite cold throughout the month of March. So you can see here when we look at the last 30 days of precipitation, now this is expressed as percent of normal, that flow pattern does this. So you can see that we really target this section of the country with a lot of precipitation. And because the northwest has been so close to that ridge, we've been down on precipitation for the last month. And we're sitting at about 70% of normal on that snowpack. We looked at that a lot in the last several videos here in parts of Washington state. Okay, when we look at all of this on the whole, we have to just stretch things back to this entire what we call water year. So look at this. This is now the water year. So this is October 1st, 2018 to basically the end here of March. And what we really see is that only a few places across the country have been drier than average, and one of those places has been up here in parts of the Pacific Northwest. Now, what that's really done is this. Going back to October 2nd, looking at the drought monitor, you're going to see that because so much of the country has been wet, comparing that to the latest drought monitor, which was just released 2 days ago, it looks something like this. But the only place that's really hung on to their drought has been parts of Oregon and Washington. And to be honest, Oregon has been much wetter, especially central parts, than Washington has. So we're concerned as we get out of this wet season and into our drier time period here about the fact that parts of the Pacific Northwest are dry. Now, California, you are virtually drought-free. You're out of drought stages 1 through 4, and it's been a long time since we have seen that. And I'm just going to tell you, the changes in the flow of the jet stream right now are going to keep this part of the country quite wet, but we might actually start to work away on that drier soil there in parts of Washington. So let's talk about this and try to figure out where this pattern's taking us. It's all happening in the Pacific. Now, what we've seen is a big ridge that's been sitting over Alaska, and the flow of that has basically done something like this, and it's cut around and then come to the south around the low. Well, we're about to see a complete breakdown of that ridge, and you're about to see very strong, what we call zonal flow across the Pacific. So we're looking here at winds in the jet stream, and the color coding tells you the speed. Now, the flatter this curve of fast winds looks, the more zonal the flow. And as I click play, look at how the Pacific Ocean is just featuring this dominant, nearly straight west to east flow. And when we have that set up, we tend to get a lot of weather systems that come into the west coast, which means the end of our rainy season looks to be quite wet. Look at the systems kind of loaded up in the Pacific right now. This is looking over the last day and a half here at our high-resolution GOES 17 satellite animation of water vapor. We have systems that are targeting the west coast, and we better figure out when they're going to get here and what they're going to be bringing. So let's take this view so we can see more of the Pacific Ocean. We're looking at the operational European model. As I click play, we're looking at precipitation type and intensity. And let's just see what our weekend holds for us. We know that on Friday, throughout the day on Friday into Friday evening, we got widely scattered precipitation across much of the western United States. But that all transitions east into a large system that moves across the middle part of the country for this weekend. Notice this. This is now Saturday midday. Things are relatively dry. Same thing with Saturday night into Sunday. We're going to have a nice weekend coming up here. But you can see the next system taking shape early next week. I got us out now to Monday morning. We're going to be watching that next low pressure system come on shore. Its trajectory is primarily Northern California, Oregon, and Washington, and it comes on shore and kind of keeps things wet from Monday evening through, it looks like to be about Wednesday evening. But at that time, we're watching our next system take shape here in the Central Pacific, and it comes on shore by the end of next week. So this is now Thursday into Friday. Very windy conditions with this one, but you can see how the Pacific is loading up on the tail end of that strong Pacific jet stream, making much of next week and also the end of next week quite wet. And that is not the end of it. We're going to continue to see this pattern evolving over the next 2 to 3 weeks. I'll show you that in a few seconds here. So we just step back and say, well, how much precipitation are we get from now all the way until next Friday night? We're going to focus first on the northwest. Look at this. A lot of coastal precipitation here, which is needed. Remember, this is a place where it's relatively dry. So we may be seeing in here in parts of Oregon, some places getting between 1 inch and 3 inches of rainfall along the coast. We will be picking up some snow here in parts of the northern Rockies, really in here into the Sawtooth Mountains. The Blue Mountains not picking up too much here. Much of the Columbia Basin relatively snow-free as well, because this pattern is actually a milder pattern. But the snow you see back here in parts of Wyoming, Utah, that's primarily from the system emerging over the next couple of days here in the Central Plains. We'll take a closer look here at Northern California. You can see the precipitation amounts stretching north of San Francisco, generally ranging, now this again is over the next week, it's us all the way out to next Friday night. We're seeing in general 1 inch to some locations, 2.5, 3 inches of rain in Northern California, picking up some snowpack, but only at really high elevation. Our temperature pattern's quite warm right now. Southern California, you're out of it. Okay, so these next several systems have more of a northerly trajectory, so we're going to keep much of Southern California relatively dry. Now, when we look at week 2, you'll just see, here we're looking at precipitation anomalies. Look at this. This same region is continuing to be hit with that strong zonal flow out of the Pacific. And as a consequence, Northern California all the way up to British Columbia, this is going to be a region that's going to be wetter than average. Now, the same pattern also keeps things quite stormy and quite wet in the Central Plains. And just for the folks on the West Coast to keep this in perspective, remember, we're still dealing with a lot of major river flooding right here down the middle part of the country. So this is going to be adding to that over the coming days and weeks. Now, to show you what temperatures are going to do, well, let's see here. Overall, you're going to see a mild pattern. Now, what I'd like to do is show you temperature anomalies. So we're going to compare these to average. Where we have a lot of cloud cover and precipitation, you'll see things cooler than average. But overall, it's a relatively warmer pattern through the weekend. I think you're going to have a beautiful weekend. This is getting us all the way through Monday morning. What we just saw was several days here in the western United States where temperatures were at or above average. But remember, by early next week, we have those systems coming on shore. So when you see the cooler pattern showing up at times, like this is next Tuesday evening, this is primarily driven based on cloud cover and precipitation. And it's only a few degrees colder than average. It's not bitterly cold air in place. So in general, we have a milder pattern taking us through the next few weeks here. And as a result of that, we're going to continue to melt away some of that snow, and this rain's going to have a better opportunity to soak in. So the good news about that, that's really going to improve pasture health in parts of the Pacific Northwest and in Montana, get that moisture into the soil, get things greening up there. It will keep working away on that snow, but overall, this is a good thing. Some of the concerns for ag, when we bring in some of this wetter weather, this is going to kind of make things mucky and muddy. So we're talking about planting of potatoes and onions, sugar beets, looking about spring wheat, looking how the winter wheat will be doing. It'd be great for the winter wheat, but those other crops, they're going to be having to deal with quite a bit of mud with these next few systems. So just makes things kind of mucky there. As I finish this up, I just want to show you brand new long-range updates just came out last night from the European model. Let's go looking at mid-April. Look at this dominant feature right here. That tells me that this strong Pacific jet stream is not just a temporary feature. It looks as though we're going to continue to split our flow like this around the West Coast with time. This is in general a milder pattern, but with each one of these waves that comes off the Pacific, we will continue to be bringing in more kind of hits of moisture here with time. So this looks like what much of April is going to bring us here, this flow pattern. I covered this in great detail in our long-range update that came out on Wednesday. Head to my.nutrienagsolutions.com to see that update. And I'll finish with one last map just to show you how mild of a pattern this is. Getting through mid-April, we can see that much of the western United States will carry a warm bias. So a lot to talk about there, but there's a lot of interesting things that are kind of cooking up in the Pacific Ocean that are changing our weather patterns across the western U.S. But with that, I'll go ahead and wrap up that forecast video. We at Nutrien Ag Solutions hope you look forward to our next Western Regional forecast coming out on Monday morning. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you.